Hello. This week we introduce the core principles of administrative law. The purpose of this is to lay the foundations of what we're going to study throughout the rest of the term, and to give you an idea of the scope and purpose of administrative law. Now, customarily, a lot of the admin law textbooks just jump you straight in and start right from the legal principles and where they come from. I don't like to do that because I think we need to understand the purpose of these rules, to understand how they operate, and particularly to understand the way in which they overlap with each other and they overlap with other systems of administrative law. So we're taking it easy and we're looking at the big picture first for that very reason. And because of that, I want to talk a little bit, just a little bit of a diversion into the difference between deep and surface learning. There's two ways you can learn, deep and surface learning. And surface learning is just learning what you need to know to get by. Just tell me what the basics are, that's all I need to do. Deep learning involves understanding the reason for things the way they are and the principles on which they're built. Now, there is purposes for different forms of learning, of course, and if you look at something like fixing a computer, most people aren't all that interested in deep learning. They just want to Google a site that'll find out what their problem is and tell them what they need to do to fix it. Steps 1, 2 and 3, and that's fine. But when you're learning about a career and somewhere that's particularly something like law, surface learning is pretty bad. First of all, it doesn't future-proof you because once things change, your surface learning doesn't serve you very well. And also it means that you don't really ever really get a grasp of what's going on behind the scenes, and therefore you're not very good at anticipating how things will change as time goes on. So occasionally people will say to me, look, I'm not really interested in this area of law, can you just tell me what I need to get through? And that's your choice to make if you want to be a surface learner. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you do that, and you're not really safeguarding yourself in terms of understanding how things change. And admin law is a great example of that. It's changed a lot since the last time I taught it, let alone when I studied it. But last time I taught it, in the early 2000s, we've seen substantial erosion of the admin law system. Successive governments, I know you've heard me say this before, have tried to erode and undermine the admin law system. And suddenly, the constitutional basis of admin law has become very important. Something we never even touched on that last time I taught. It was just something that was just there in the background. Now, to understand why that is, we need to have more of a deep understanding. We need to get under the surface and understand why these things apply. So I'll let you work through the readings this week for yourself and the study guide, but the study guide tries to contextualize these principles within not only the background of good government, but also the discourses on public sector management and public sector governance that have their own principles of the way things are done. And that will hopefully set us up for next week when we start looking at how these principles actually form design ideas in terms of how you go about designing a system of rules and management that is actually fair and just and legal and so on. Other tips, I'd say, make sure you print out for yourself a copy of the relevant parts of the Administrative Decisions Judicial Review Act, particularly Section 5 and Section 7. And that's just, it's only a couple of pages, and it's really worthwhile sticking it in with your study guide and having it available to yourself at all times. That's Commonwealth legislation, and that gives a breakdown of what all the principles are. And we'll be working through those in the workshop and looking at some scenarios and how they fit together. And yes, it is an area where there is considerable overlap between these principles, and sometimes an administrative wrongdoing will actually cover more than one base. And that's fine, because these are an attempt to codify a whole approach, a whole perspective and an idea around government, rather than to regulate individual specific atomized forms of behaviour. So have a look at that, and have a look at the workshop questions for this week, and have a go at least finding which ones you think apply to which principles, and then we'll work through it and we'll have a look at not only how these principles apply, but also try and get at that idea of, well, where does it come from? Where's it going? What are the core parts of administrative law that are codified in the Constitution, are things that are constitutionally protected? There are not many words in the Constitution that talk about administrative law, but it's in there. and it's now a very much live and open question as to what that part of the Constitution actually means.